there's end of service and end of life, we've passed both of those at this point. And based upon the infrastructure that we have, which is, more legacy based, when compared to current standards, you're almost putting a square peg in a round hole to try to be able to fix a solution. So what we're trying to do is be as proactive as we can to focus on the infrastructure at a point in time where it's going to be affordable to do the switch over and give us more longevity long term as we need to switch out this hardware. And as you get to end of life hardware, as long as your infrastructure is consistent, you have the ability to plug and play future solutions into that, where we've passed the SDHD capabilities.
I have one question for Todd and then one question for our attorneys. Todd, could you speak to the dollar amount that was assigned to this item back in May when we did the first reading, and compare that to where you're at today with your recommendation on the dollar amount?
Sure. So the initial ask, based off the best numbers provided at the time in the letter, was 18.4 million. The cost that was reflected in the CAVS letter, and it is decreased to the 16,452 after fully digging into all the costs in collectively working with consultants and the teams, bringing this number down, which is 1.9 difference. So there is a savings, if you will, of 1.9 as we speak today.
And to our attorneys, I know you've been part of this review process. With your knowledge of the lease and the definition of major capital, can you advise us that this work that Todd described meets the major capital definition in the lease?
Either way, yes, it does. It's obsolete. The system is obsolete.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
I have another question. Todd, that 16.452 number, does that include any contingencies?
It does.
Okay.
It includes basically all of the soft costs, and my papers are down there.
Okay, fine.
And it's fine. But as we have a standard formula that DNI use for every project, and you basically put the number in and it builds your contingency soft costs. So yes.
Could you generally speak, Todd, to the reason for the reduction?
Yeah, sure. We went into this thing as, I know I sat with Anthony after he sent the letter, and he says it's probably heavy on contingency side because of the market that we're in today. Buying this stuff, who knows where it's going to be when we get there. So it was just a protection, a coding, if you will, and we pulled some of that coding back and got better numbers, and that's why a lot of this looks the way it does today.
If I can just add, I mean, that number is good if we go in the next, 60 days, right? If we pull the trigger in the next 60 days. If we don't, then we'll be coming back with, who knows where the escalator is gonna be in a year, right? Not to mention all the risks that we're taking. So, when we first did it, we kind of took a blended number because we didn't know where we were gonna be on the schedule of inflation and escalation. So that's the number we originally gave ourselves as inflation. Now we have a new framework of hopefully pull the trigger, get some deposits in, and be able to pull this project off next summer. We feel pretty good about where the numbers are today. But if we've had some delay, then obviously that would change some of that.
That then in turn suggests a question for the team. Hearing you, Anthony, on the 60-day threshold, if the board does approve this resolution today, I know you're aware that neither the city or county, to my knowledge, has identified a funding source for the major capital repair item. Do you have a contingency plan in terms of timing of funding?
Ken, I'll answer that. As we've always done in the past, we've worked in good faith with the county and our public partners in the event that we would need to, outlay a portion of this project to be reimbursed at a later date while funding is being worked on and secured. We feel feel we've got a great history and track record of doing that in partnership and collaboration with the Gateway and with the county, and so we would be prepared to do that to a certain extent. Obviously, for us, you know, we can't foot the entire bill all at once, but we would be willing to work in great faith to identify what the right financial parameters would be that would allow our public partners plenty of time to be able to identify sources and then ultimately be able to complete the project, given the financial parameters that have been outlaid.
Thank you for that. Unless I'm missing something, I believe we're ready to take up the resolution, which is resolution 2023-4. It's part of the board package. We've all had the opportunity to review it. Do I hear a motion on the resolution?
I'm sorry, Ken, can I ask one last question?
Sure.
Will we expect the same amount of longevity for this system as the past one?
So I can chime in here. You know, the only thing constant about change and technology is change itself, right? The pace at which technology is changing is rapid now more than ever. That's why I think our approach to this is a responsible approach, focusing on the infrastructure. The infrastructure shouldn't change within the next, we'll call it between 10 to 15 years. And that big part of the transition and what we have here is setting us up for success for future, you know, for future years. Now the hardware itself, I always use a really simple analogy, right? You're not using the same computer you were 10 years ago. That has to go through a refresh cycle. You generally see hardware lasting about 3 to 5 years nowadays. And for us, we need to have a supportive understanding, system reliance. We have to have the redundancy that's in place in order to be able to put on these shows. So long-winded answer to say, yes, I do see this setting ourselves up for success for the next 10 to 15 years. But I don't have a crystal ball to tell you how things are going to evolve, nor do I think anybody in the technology space would be able to put 100% confidence in that.
Matt, a little extra clarity there. Remember, our threshold is $500,000, right? So if a component that to Michael's point, is our goal is to get the infrastructure set. So if we have to swap out components as we go forward, that's a part of our ongoing business obligations, right? So
Yeah.
that's how we're approaching this.
And again, for those not familiar with our history, what Anthony's speaking to is the lease provides that minor capital repairs, those under 500,000 are the team's responsibility. Gateway is only responsible for what we call major capital repairs, which is over 500,000. So, back to the resolution. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Again,
Todd?
Thank you very much. I'm gonna change seats on this one. We gotta change seats and
Yes.
change my mindset, because we gotta move on to something different, so.
Yes.
Anyway, we have, second part of that letter is vertical transportation, and again, we follow the same procedures. I have with me today Bill Shermer, our consultant, who worked with us, who's worked with us a long time. We go way back. He's done work for us in the ballpark years ago, and I found him again to help me with this one. So he'll provide feedback, answer questions if anyone would have it. So Bill met with the Cavaliers on June 8th, walked through the facility with their maintenance managers who helped with the service of escalator elevators, and put his eyes on all the equipment and looked at the request of modernization and or replacement. Bill shared with me his executive summary. We had a phone call, follow-up meeting, and we are now, then we go on to each consultant who I worked with. When Lurch Base was in the Osborne FCA, we walked through that, read that. And Bill also did a summary executive report to me that both consultants are in agreement that it is needed. We compared both reports. We were actually slightly higher in our report with costs, is we wanna take a further look at the monitoring system in the security control room. After reviewing, walking through notes, the scope basically, there's 9 of them, I'll just hit them real quick, for this repair and modernization, is a comprehensive study of both escalator and elevator. For that replacement, we're looking to replace obsolete, controls, improve system, liability, ride quality, and be compliant with ADA. Replace some of this terminology, some won't get, but new ropes, governors. We reuse the counterweights that are existing. We gotta replace door hardware, this is all ADA, driven as well. Bring up the code signal fixtures within the cabs, and just in general, the cabin enclosures need to be touched. Last 2, replace, traveling controls and remove and replace control panels. That's a lot, to say, but, I know I have our consultant here today, and Bill, if I'm talking to you back in my head, but if you could just give us like a review of what you've seen and your recommendation for this repair, that would be great.
Sure, here, basically, in Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, you have 13 elevators and 1 handicap lift. Of those 13 elevators, you have 10 passenger elevators, 2 service elevators, and 1 freight elevator. When you're doing an elevator modernization, you look at every component within an elevator or escalator system, and you decide, will this last 30 years? If the answer is no, you replace it during the modernization. It's really that simple. Some people don't make it that simple, but I also gave it a schedule of about 28 months using 3 teams. 1 team doing the escalators, 1 team doing the service and freight elevators, 1 team doing the passenger elevators. Okay, I mean, I don't know how much easier, what you have, the current elevator control systems are all obsolete, which isn't a problem, the elevators still run. Until a major component goes where you can't get a replacement. Now that elevator is down and out of service for, let's see, probably a year, right? This way, you're planning a modernization. In other words, you get all the architectural engineering and everything done up front, then they come in and they replace it. If you wait until elevator or escalator goes because it's obsolete, you're talking about a year before you get that done, with lead times was one of the questions before. The escalators are completely obsolete. They were installed by O&K Escalator, which is a German manufacturer. They are no longer in business. Like I said, they'll still run, unless something major goes wrong. Then they'll be totally out of service for at least a year. I mean, that's basically, I don't know how more simple I can get it, but.
That's good, we have questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are the components of the whole system, are they of equal age, or are they of all different?
Okay, they're all of equal age, right? They were installed 29 years ago, and I'm glad you brought that up. As a general rule of thumb, and you don't even have to use it here, you can use it outside. An elevator system will last you about 30 years as a good rule of thumb. These are 29 years old. The rule of thumb applies, okay?
So it sounds to me like, and I know that these things can get, it sounds to me like a lot of this is a compliance issue as much as it is anything else, number one, with ADA and others. Also, I would think that there's a liability issue here as well with elevators and escalators, should something happen and someone get injured.
It depends on what the accident is.
Right.
I mean, if the elevator, a lot of cases what you hear, especially what the old MG says, elevators wouldn't level in properly, people would walk in, trip over them. Obviously, that would be on the elevator company, the rule of thumb.
Right.
If it's a lack of putting up barricades because an elevator's out, that would become the owner. So it really depends on the case and what happened involved.
Yep.
Todd, same question, can you compare the dollar amount we were given in May versus your recommendation today?
The initial major capital request was 9.8, and again, working with 2 consultants, the team's consultant and our consultant, and working diligently with Anthony's staff, we were able to bring the number in with a full loaded number at 7.9, so 9.8 to 7.9.
Here, one other thing too. whenever you do an elevator modernization, whoever installs it is the original manufacturer, you want them maintaining it for at least the first 5 years.
Yeah.
Then everybody else catches up, alright? But for the first 5 years, so when you put an elevator modernization package out, you should put a 5-year elevator maintenance specification out with it. If you wait till the end, like some architects and engineers will do, they'll say, okay, supply an elevator maintenance proposal upon completion. If they put in a proprietary system, you have given an elevator company a blank check. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, they use them, alright? So, having a non-proprietary system installed is very, very important, okay?
And at our standard going into the contracts, we carry the first 5 years and, you know, even if it's scoreboards or whatever, we address that in our specs, so, thank you, Bill.
One more question, if I may. You touched on something, and it's been my experience that what you said is exactly right. If you have a Kone system, you have to have Kone parts. So you said that this was a German manufacturer. So will Kone or anyone else, name your manufacturer, Schindler or whoever, will that be compatible with what we currently have?
Well, here, first of all, when we're talking about modernizing the escalators, you're talking about basically tearing it down to the truss
Okay,
and installing everything new.
okay.
So if it's Schindler who does it, if it's Kone who does it, whoever does it, as long as it's covered under a 5-year maintenance contract, you should be okay,
Yeah, okay.
right?
Before we move to the resolution on this item, I wanna make one historic observation. Back when what was then called the Q Transformation Project was completed, and in the days leading up to the ribbon cutting, one of the Cleveland.com folks asked Len Komorowski, what's the impact of all these changes? And he said, significant. We've touched most parts of the building, should last for the foreseeable future. He said there are some items, and he specifically called out elevators and escalators that will come up, but not at the magnitude of, you know, obviously the $185 million project. So I bring that up because it was foretold back in the euphoria about the grand reopening and everything else. So this is not a surprise to any of us that were around back then.
Yeah, here, I mean, the thing is here, you can either plan a modernization, which you're doing now, which is the way to do it, or you can react to one, like if something goes obsolete. If you have to react to one, you're gonna wish you were never born, trust me, it becomes a real pain, okay?
So we have in front of us, resolution 2023-5. Do I hear a motion on that resolution?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything more on your report, Todd?
That's enough. Can I ask just a process question? Todd, the typical process is that following this vote, Gateway sends correspondence to the city and the county describing what happened, and you know, that's a typical part of the process.
Okay, we'll now move to our,
Here, one thing real fast, because before my 2-hour meter runs dry. If anybody needs to get a hold of me or if any questions, Todd has all my contact information, just go through Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
we're now, our next agenda item is Gateway Operation Summary. Paul, you handling that?
I just have a few comments today. There's an operating income statement in your packets today.
The very last page.
For the first 6 months of 2023, we're halfway through the year, and right now we're showing a net loss of $61,000 through the midway point of 2023. We're forecasting right now, 6 months ago, that's a long way. Right now, we're forecasting to improve slightly to a $54,000 net loss for the year. By comparison, for 2022, we had for the whole year, we had a $287,000, operating income, for 2022. Things can change like this from year to year, and just, a couple of the items where we're showing variances right now, and really, why we have loss through the first 6 months of the year. If you look at the maintenance line and note A, we're significantly over budget on concrete spending this year. There were a couple projects that were identified after the passage of the 2023 budget that involved safety issues. So there's between, we all saw in by the local news, the removal of the pavers, original pavers from the park and, or from the plaza, and we replaced it with safe, nice smooth sidewalk out there. And also, there's an underground service area under the city garage that load-ins are conducted of equipment for shows at both facilities. There was some peeling, concrete peeling on a wall down there, and that's been repaired too. So that's why there's a blowout on the maintenance line, it's concrete. Just a further note with security, a big reason for our $287,000 net income last year is because we were having attendance issues with security. We've closed that gap a good bit this year. Last year we had a 26% favorable variance, and through the first 6 months of this year, it's about 13% favorable. So we've basically cut it in half. And just a further note on security, there've been some spike in criminal activity and proximity to our facilities, if you've seen on the news also. So we're finding ways already, and probably through the end of the year, the foreseeable future, where our spending on security should be really close to what we budgeted for the year. So, do you have any questions off of that?
No, but I believe you have a resolution for us, right?
Yes, I was, if I could cede to Scott on this one.
I'll take this one over. It's relatively straightforward, as you saw, the Board of Tax Materials Resolution 2023-06 relates to the Gateway 401k plan, and specifically Brian Kelly, the former controller of Gateway, was the trustee for the 401k plan. Mr. Kelly is no longer with Gateway, and therefore the 401k plan reached out to Gateway and said we need a new trustee. We thought it actually made sense in this instance to have both Todd as the trustee, rather than having just one individual, have Todd as the trustee and have Paul as an authorized representative, so he could interact with the 401k plan directly. So this resolution just asks the board to approve the removal of Mr. Kelly as the current 401k trustee, and install Todd and Paul as the trustee and authorized representative, and authorize UCAN to be able to sign the form that the 401k trustee requested.
Questions on the resolution?
Just a further point that, Paychex, the payroll company, handles the record keeping for us. My role is mostly, getting the employees enrolled and, just reviewing the quarterly reports to make sure that the matches are in properly and stuff, so.
Well, I'll move approval of resolution 2023-6. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we are going to have a brief, I emphasize brief, executive session. Because of some of the complexity of the items we talked about, we will take questions at the end of the meeting. So, but for now, we're asking, Dennis or Scott, can you direct folks to the room?
I can do so, I can do a roll call, so we go into executive session, yes.
Okay, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, all we need is somebody to make a motion to
So moved.
turn into executive session to discuss discuss, disputes that are subject of pending or imminent court action.
Okay, I vote yes.
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 Yes.